Getting the smile and confidence you've been dreaming about, all from the comfort of your home, isn't a total mystery with Byte clear aligners. Just don't be surprised if all your friends start asking, "What's your secret?" Begin by ordering your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95. Byte clear aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces, plus they offer flexible financing, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
You can't do that to me, right?
We don't have a guest, so I just don't care. I'm just oops. Professionalism has just been yeeted out the window.
I mean, this is one of the last things we're recording this year too, and it's just Hi guys, welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we typically and usually open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth. This episode is a little different. It is our last episode of the year. We're taking a break from talking about kinder trauma to chat about the genre films that really resonated with us this year. Despite 2020, everyone knows what 2020 was. There were some really, really good genre movies. And I think in a weird way, I think the pandemic helped some of the indie releases because everything was going to VOD. So the things that would have just been released on VOD regardless, I think got a little bit more love. So there's some good shit out there this year.
There are some really good things out there. And even though because of the pandemic, we lost things like the new Halloween movie or the new Candyman and stuff, there's a whole lot of indie films that I agree. I think got a little bit more attention this year because of everything going to shit outside. And there was there's some really good movies this year, period. I was surprised.
It was very hard to make a top 10.
There really was. I could have done a top 20. And the other thing is that I kind of forgot some movies that came out this year because this year has been so long. I mean, did you know that Batman Returns came out this year? I mean, that's how long this year is.
I hate that it took me a second to comprehend what you were saying. God damn it. Lovely. But for real, Underwater came out this year.
I know. It was the first movie I saw this year, I believe, new movie I saw this year.
Right? It was mine too. Man, that's so weird.
That and The Grudge.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. That feels like 6 years ago. But anyway.
Yeah. There was also some really good festival films this year that...
Oh, my God. Yes.
Because, when we were sitting down to do our list, this is the second year we've done it, and we always want to make sure that we're including movies that everyone could potentially have seen this year. And, there's a couple that just came out. I really wanted to talk about Synchronic this year, but it only came out, at such a very small release back in October. So, I mean, that one is left off the list, but there's so many festival favorites that
Yeah.
Should be coming out hopefully next year is what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I'm hoping some of the ones I included are coming out soon. I know one of them has distribution. I don't know about the others, but there was quite a few that I really wanted to include on my top 10 that I couldn't, or I didn't feel fair to because, they weren't for everyone to watch. So, But we're going to give a couple of our favorite shout outs, though, just because they deserve shout outs. Mm-hmm. Terry, what were some of your festival favorites from this year?
Well, one that I kind of just saw on my own, I kind of just signed up for one of the festivals mostly to watch this movie, and I saw a couple others that were decent, but The Vigil.
Oh my God, The Vigil is so good.
Which is a man that is providing overnight watch to a deceased member of his former Orthodox Jewish community, finds himself opposite a malevolent entity. And it's I was expecting like a slow burn, but it is not a slow burn in my opinion. It kind of reminded me a little bit of like Insidious, where it's just like it's kind of playful in its horror.
Yeah, well, and it's like an exorcism movie, but not Catholicism, which is like really special, and it is scary.
It got me.
It's really it's scary. I saw it at TIFF in 2019. And I was lucky enough to watch it in a theater, and like the reactions.
Oh, see, that would have been good.
They're so cool. I mean, it's so like good to see that, horror continues to diversify representations and like move outside of white Catholicism, Christianity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was one for me. What about you?
Oh, it's just a cat coming in. So one of the films that was absolutely stoked to watch, and I'm excited got distribution from Shudder, is Violation, and it played as one of the 3 films in TIFF's Midnight Madness slate this year. And so Violation is about a troubled woman on the edge of divorce who returns home to her younger sister after years apart. But when her sister and brother-in-law betray her trust, she embarks on a vicious crusade of revenge. It is a female co-directed rape revenge movie, and it is it's very difficult to watch, but it's told in this like a non-linear storytelling, and it's just really a really interesting examination of the consequences of revenge and what it means to really commit this kind of like, a lot of rape revenge movies are very fantastical, but this one is very realistic and gritty.
Okay.
In a way that's not like Revenge the movie gritty, but in a way that's like agonizing. But it's absolutely gorgeous, and Shudder is distributing it next year. So I'm very excited for that. It's not going to be for everyone, I know, but it deserves some big love.
I heard you. I remember you talking about that one, and it was one that like I missed, and then when I saw that it was, because I believe it's playing at Sundance, and then
it is, yeah, and
then it got picked up by Shudder. So hopefully people will be able to see that soonish.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the reactions will be. It'll probably be one of those movies that like people will either really enjoy or think is like ridiculously cruel. And I can see both ways.
Another movie that kind of like that also just got picked up by Shudder earlier this year, and if you were lucky enough to watch it over Halloween weekend, you've already seen it. But Lucky by Natasha Kermani is another one that I'm really excited for people to see next year, that I think is going to have a kind of a different set of reactions to it potentially, where it's, has Bria Grant in it. It was written by Bria, and it's about a suburban woman that fights to be believed as she finds herself stalked by a threatening figure who returns to her house night after night. It's kind of like, it uses like the slasher genre and like the home invasion genre to explore trauma, and it really, really, really worked for me. And we talked with Natasha for an episode, our video episode for Fighting Ass Film Festival, and so that one you guys will be able to hear that episode if you didn't tune in sometime in 2021 when it comes out. But that was a movie that really worked for me.
It really worked for me too. I think it's really, really pushes boundaries, and I think a lot of women made movies this year that were just like badass and pushed boundaries, which goes into my next movie that I really loved at festivals. It's called Rose Plays Julie.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that one too. Again,
co-directed by a woman. It was directed by Christine Malloy and Jill Lawler. And so it's about an adopted girl who seeks out her birth mother only to be told her mother has no desire to meet her. I don't want to give anything away because this movie is like a very, really gorgeous and ridiculous and sad journey that it kind of needs to be seen to really understand it, to like feel it. And I feel like giving anything away about it would do it a disservice. But it's another really hard movie to watch, but another really beautiful look at a topic that is not addressed enough in horror movies. And it's a horror movie in the fact that the topic is horrific. It's not necessarily scary, but the way that they handle this certain subject matter is quite good and quite nuanced and a really interesting way to interpret the rape revenge genre, which is all I will say. So.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that one, and it definitely, like, if you talk about one of those, because, you know, we've talked before, it's not really my favorite subgenre of film, but, like, if it's one that you talk about a lot, then, like, it's one that has been it goes on my list, and that one has been on it, so I'm hoping that one doesn't have distribution yet, does it?
Not yet, but I'm hoping, especially if Violation plays well, I mean, they're not that similar, but I'm hoping, like, you know, this has been a year where a lot of movies directed by women have tackled rape revenge and trauma, and I'm really happy about that because most of y'all know that's like a very, very big research interest of mine, so I'm hoping that it'll get distribution soon.
Cool.
I'll be following it like a hawk, or watching it like a hawk, because it's so good.
One that I also saw that I really liked was called The Boy Behind the Door. Did you see this one?
No. Where did it play?
So this one played at Fantastic Fest.
Okay.
And it is a lean, mean little thriller about a boy and his best friend who get kidnapped. And they're taken to this like house, and the one kid is left in the trunk of the car while the other kid gets taken up inside, and he manages to escape. And as he's like trying to flee, he hears his friend screaming in the house, and so he goes back, and it's basically almost kind of like I think I would compare it maybe as far as like a tension builder to like what is it called? Don't Speak.
Oh, Don't Breathe.
Don't Breathe. Yes, Don't Breathe. The
Sorry, it's like Don't Speak. I got that.
I know. I was like, that is not right. That is not right. That is a song. But that is what my mind went to. Yeah, Don't Breathe. So it's like that where he's like in this house trying to outmaneuver the kidnapper or kidnappers in the house while trying to save his best friend. And the way it deals with a very mature subject matter, because it is about human trafficking, but it's very intense, and the focus is always on the kids, and it's not. I didn't find it to be as exploitive as I was kind of fearing it to be, and it is intense. So that one really, I'm really excited for people to see that one.
Hell yeah. So the next one that I saw, it premiered at Salem Horror Fest, which I was very privileged to be a part of and gave a lecture. Just self-promotion here. The Strings, which is directed by Ryan Glover, absolutely fucking blew me away. Did you end up catching this one, Terry?
I did catch that one.
Cool. And so our friend of the show, Drew, designed the poster. I'm just going to give her a little plug. But so in The Strings, in the dead of winter, a musician travels to a remote cottage to work on new material, but she soon finds herself under attack from a mysterious dark presence. It is such a cool, weird interpretation of a haunted house ghost movie with the most beautiful, haunting music.
Oh, the music is so good.
The music is gorgeous. And so the lead is played by Tegan Johnston, who is a musician. So her music is absolutely gorgeous. And I think I tweeted about this when I was watching a lot of these festival films, but there's a lot of really good movies that it's like women losing their minds in the freezing cold. And I was like, this is my favorite weird genre now. So that one is not to be missed. I don't think it has distribution yet, but with the response that it got out of Salem Horror Fest, I wouldn't be surprised if it got distribution relatively quickly because people were raving about it.
It's really good.
It's really good. It's definitely a quiet, slow burn, but like it's worth it. It's like there's enough weirdness sprinkled throughout that it doesn't feel like it's a slog. It's definitely like tries to be purposely scary to keep you invested. So I really...
And the performance, she's really good in it. And you can tell that she's like a musician.
Good.
Yeah, I really dug that one.
I really, really dug it. And it's queer.
Yeah. Yes, it
is.
is.
That's just like a nice little something extra. So yeah, that was a big one from this year that I really adored.
Yeah. Another one for me was The Block Island Sound.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you're talking about Block Island Sound.
Which was written and directed by the McManus brothers, and they were involved in Cobra Kai as producers and also as the producers and writers for some episodes of American Vandal, that show on Netflix about who drew the dicks. Which is such a good, if you haven't seen that on Netflix, it is there's only 2 seasons and they're so good. But this is another kind of genre bending. I don't know what to call it exactly, so I'm not going to call it anything. I'm just going to say that it's about the Block Island Sound, which is this real place off of the east coast of America. And the official synopsis is: something lurks off the coast of Block Island, silently influencing the behavior of a fisherman. And after suffering a series of violent outbursts, he unknowingly puts his family in grave danger. And the way this movie unfolds and the way it makes you think it's something, and then it makes you think it's something else, and then it reverses again, is so good. The performances are fantastic. I loved this film, and it got 2 gasps out of me, and I don't gasp very easily, but some of the way it the way it unfolds just really surprised me, and I love it when a movie can do that.
Yeah, and I will say, and let me know if this is incorrect, if you liked The Beach House, you'll probably like the Block Island Sound. They're not that similar, but there's like a quasi-similar vibe that I think,
could see that.
If you liked The Beach House, you'll probably enjoy the Block Island Sound.
Yeah.
Does that have distribution yet? Do we know?
I do not believe that it does yet. I had been talking with the McManus brothers around the time that it premiered, and they were hoping that the kind of like the response would get them some, but I haven't heard from them since then, so I'm not exactly sure. I'm hopeful, because it's really good, and I think for some people it's going to do something that they're going to really, really, really enjoy.
Yeah, I agree. So the next one I'm talking about is a vampire movie, and I'm so excited for this movie because it's a gross vampire movie, which we all know is my favorite. This is Boys from County Hell, which is an Irish horror comedy, and so it's about a crew of hardy road workers who are led by a father and son who hate each other, and they must survive the night when they accidentally awaken an ancient Irish vampire. It's so good. Like, it's got this nasty, nasty vampire at the center of it. And so the one thing I will say is the comedy comes in spurts, but it's not like entirely a comedy. Right. I think it's scarier than a horror comedy, but that's just how I experienced it. But it's gory and fun, and it's Irish, and the vampire is amazing. So it was basically like perfect for me, but it knocked it out of the park in my book.
I really liked it too. I was glad that you were going to talk about this one because it was on my list that I had to like edit out. But
I know
I love Jack Rowan in it.
Yes, he's so good.
He's so handsome.
He is so handsome.
And he was in a little queer movie called Benjamin.
Oh, yeah.
And I love him, and I really enjoyed that one too. I was very pleasantly surprised with it.
Yeah, I mean, like, it was at Night Stream this year, which was great. And I will say virtual festivals I think we've both discovered are harder to cover than we could have imagined.
Yeah.
But I also think it was nice that a lot of these things were accessible to everybody. So
yes.
Anyway, yeah, that was one of my big happy watches this year.
Yeah. So my final one is it's called The Columnist.
Oh, yeah. I did not catch this, but I know it was at Fantasia and a couple other places.
Yeah, I think I watched this one out of Fright Fest, but it was playing at both Fright Fest and Fantastic Fest this year. Or Fantasia this year? Was it Fantasia?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's at Fantasia.
Yeah. And so The Columnist is about, it's about this woman who is a columnist and an author who gets an anonymous nasty messages and death threats on social media. So one day she has had enough and she decides to stand up for herself and take revenge. And it is gleefully dark in like the darkly comedic. Like that is my bread and butter. I love dark comedies, and this is pitch black. I'm telling you, there is a shot at the very end that like I'm not going to spoil, but it's like this very like almost triumphant look that just like you just want to shut up and say yes, queen. I love this movie so much. This movie was one of the surprises, and I can't wait. I don't know if it has distribution. It is I think it's a German film.
Okay, that sounds.
It's the Netherlands. It's Dutch.
Netherlands.
So
okay, it's Dutch.
But it is phenomenal, and I love it so much. I love it when a comedy is pitch black to the point that like you don't know whether you should be like cheering or laughing or being like, oh. And this is one of those movies that does that. I think it's phenomenal, and I can't wait for people to see it.
Hell yeah. So my last one, Terry, I'm switching it up than what I told you. I'm throwing you a curveball here, is The Wanting Mare.
Oh.
I saw it at a Chattanooga, and so it's this, like, it's like an epic. It's like this sci-fi fantasy epic. So it takes place in a fictional world called Witherin. And to put it simply, a line of women pass a recurring dream through multiple generations. And it's very hard to explain it, but it's this like it's very complex. So I will say it's very complicated. And it's like the director, Nicholas Ash Bateman, built this very complex world for this movie, but it is so beautifully done. Like, it is a fantasy film unlike anything you've ever seen. And it's just like a sprawling, gorgeous thing. And the music is gorgeous. And I know they're struggling to get distribution, but this movie needs to be seen by more people. Like, it made me cry. It was one of those movies that like took me by surprise and made me like, it like got my heart in my throat. And so I know it's probably not, again, it's not going to be for everyone because it's the pacing and it's very complex, but it's also just like, you get sucked into the world. Yeah. The world building is so good and you just get sucked in and you're like, I want to know so much more about this place. And it's just, oof.
It feels like you're hearing one story in like a completely different world. So like there is like this whole world out there that is obliquely mentioned or kind of touched on. And there's this one story that's being told in it. And it kind of reminds me a little bit, I mean, it's completely different, but it kind of reminds me of like the Mortuary Collection, where it's like there's this world that is being created here, and this is kind of story set in it. So it's kind of like that, where it's like, I want to know more about this world.
Yeah, it is one of a fucking kind. I will say that.
Yeah, so, it's unlike anything I've ever seen.
It's unlike anything I've ever seen. And so I'm desperately hoping.
You can tell it's a work of love.
It is, and it was made like with no money. It was made in like a warehouse in New Jersey, and like the way that this gorgeous movie was made on such a tiny budget is so impressive. It's just like such a testament to indie filmmaking, I think, and it is just like such a shining example of what you can create on a shoestring budget and what you can create when you're just really passionate about a story and will do anything to make it happen. So that's me waxing poetic about The Wanting Mare.
It's a good one. I'm glad you threw that one out there.
I know. I was looking through Letterboxd. Oh, fuck, that was this year. Again, losing track of time. But okay, so we have talked about our festival favorites. Now we want to talk about some of our favorite moments from horror this year. So there will be spoilers.
Yep.
We will put timestamps in the show notes about which spoilers are when, in case you want to skip them if you haven't seen anything yet. So please look down there to make sure you don't get spoiled for anything that you don't want spoiled. But yeah, so there, again, there's been some fucking wild moments.
Yes.
In horror this year. Terry, why don't you start and tell me one of your favorite moments?
Okay, so one of mine is from The Invisible Man, and it is the dinner scene. And I know there's 2 dinner scenes in this movie, but it's the one with her sister.
Oh my God.
They're having dinner, and out of nowhere, the Invisible Man slashes her throat. And the way that it happens, it is like so quick, so just like out of nowhere, like it surprised the absolute fuck out of me. And it is a terrifying moment to show just how out of control the situation really is and how much damage this invisible person can actually wreak on her life. And it was like, when we saw, this was like the last movie that we saw in the movie theaters.
Yep.
And to say that the audience, like the reaction of people catching it was like, it's what I miss so much about theaters. It was such a moment.
It's just such a moment. Everyone gasped. Oh, I just miss those collective cinema watching experiences. But yeah, that moment was just like out of fucking nowhere. And I was like, oh my God, this movie doesn't give a shit.
No.
And I need to rewatch it. I need to revisit it.
I do too. I meant to rewatch it before this, but just didn't have time.
One of my absolute favorite moments from this year was from Possessor, the Brandon Cronenberg movie. And it's the melting faces part where Tasia is going into Colin, played by Christopher Abbott's body for the first time. And it's this ridiculous sequence of faces melting into each other. And it's like the surrealist, amazing portrayal of occupying another person's identity. I think, that's a trope in a lot of like sci-fi horror movies, but this was the most unique and weirdly beautiful way that I've ever seen that kind of realized. And we were really lucky to talk to Brandon about that moment, and he just talked about how like the effects person he worked with was just like super creative and really awesome to work with, and just made this weird thing that is like so unique even in that part of the movie. Like there's nothing else like that really in the rest of the film, but it just like so beautiful. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it's like yeah. I don't know what else to say. It is in a movie full of beautiful visual moments. It was certainly something.
Seriously.
It was really good.
Yeah.
Pivoting way far away from that, one of my favorite moments this year was from After Midnight, when at the very end of the film, Jeremy Gardner's character starts singing "Stay, I Missed You" by Lisa Loeb, and sings the entire song at dinner. And it is this rare moments that feels completely of the character and of the moment, but still like surprises. Like I was not, if you had told me going into this movie that there would be someone singing a Lisa Loeb song, I would have went, what the fuck are you talking about? But it feels so right in this moment of like, all of this kind of pent up emotional and romantic feelings that this man who has been failing his girlfriend lets loose in this singular moment. And then it's also tied completely to the plot, because as soon as it's over and it's like a sigh of relief of like, oh, that was so sweet, the fucking monster attacks and knocks on him, and it like all of a sudden this creature that you thought, is it real? Is this a metaphor for his like loss of his girlfriend that like has moved out? Is it even in his mind? No, this thing fucking attacks him, and it just turns into this uproarious comedic moment that like, oh, I loved it so much. It is like the perfect encapsulation of that movie, just in one 3-minute sequence.
It is. And isn't at one point he said like, I told you, or something like that? Like he makes a point to be like, I told you.
Yes,
and I love that, because there's a time and a place for movies where it's all in someone's head, but I usually do not like that. And I was so happy that it was like, haha, no, it's not. It's not one of those movies. And that's just like, ugh, so exciting. And the movie is beautiful. Like there's a lot of really beautiful, like Brea Grant's performance is absolutely gorgeous. And it's a really beautiful look at like relationships and growing up. But that ending is so good.
Oh,
it is
so good.
So good.
It's so good.
And
it kills in a movie theater.
Yeah, of course it does. Like, how does it not? How does that fucking not kill in a movie theater?
Because it was like, I had seen it before, and then when we went to Panic Fest, which was maybe the last time I'll ever have gone to a festival, it feels like.
Oh, Jesus.
It was playing and I'd already seen it, but I was with a couple friends and I was like, okay, we got to see this movie. You guys got to see this movie. And we got to see it in like an audience. And it was that moment.
That's so good. This is, again, swinging in the opposite direction of like, but so Amulet. So
Amulet.
I'm Amulet. Okay, speaking of movies that just swing for the fucking fences, directed by women this year,
yeah.
Ramal Vaghari made this movie, and it is. I think the more I think about it, the more I like it.
Yeah.
But there is this moment that is like the revelation of the movie that these women are keeping evil men in an attic and making them give birth to demons, and they don't have vaginas. They have to just like give birth out of their taints, and just like a demon just rips the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
And let me tell you,
Yeah.
boy, oh boy, when that happened, I was shooketh.
Yeah.
I like to put it lightly. Like it feels like this whole like, oh, this woman is like a slave to her mother, and then all of a sudden it's like, psych, bitch, we got you. And like
Yep.
the guy who lives in the house, and he's like, wait, what? And like, oh yeah, we like capture evil men and we make them understand what it's like to be a woman. And I kind of vibe with that.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people were like a little bit iffy on it, but I thought it was actually, and we were lucky enough to talk to her, which was amazing. But that scene really was like one of the most shocking of the year, but it was awesome. So
In a movie full of shocking moments like that definitely takes the cake. I mean, we're talking like the bat babies in the toilet. We're talking like crawling through a vagina to see this ancient goddess. Like in all of these moments, that moment, is like what the absolute fuck is going on, and it was so good.
The man looks like a decrepit old woman, and I know that there is a lot of discussions about like man in a dress tropes with that, and I do know that I will acknowledge that there is some issues with that. But like when he lifts up the dress and reveals he's got a penis, you're like, wait, huh? And then the birth, and then you see they kind of show the headlines of this was a terrible guy. I was like, good Lord. So yeah, anyway, like Amulet, it was a good one, I think. I think I'm going to say it was a good one. I'm just going to make that decision here.
There you go. I'm with you. So my last one, my last favorite moment is actually two, but they're so like inexplicably linked to each other and to the pacing of the film that like you're getting a twofer. But it is in Alone.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you made me is a strong word, but I'm glad that you coerced me to watch this movie.
Yeah, I basically told it like, you haven't seen it yet, but I'm going to spoil like the biggest moment of this movie. So if you don't want to be spoiled, watch it. But it's basically, the story is about a widowed traveler who is kidnapped by a cold-blooded killer only to escape in the wilderness. And it's like the movie changes from being a man versus woman versus man, to being like woman versus nature, to going back and forth between those two in various things. And there's a moment, like the whole film is this like giant buildup of like tension and anticipation. And it's kind of like that kind of scream that you just want to let loose, but like you're afraid of doing it, because if you do, you're going to give away your positioning. So like you are in her shoes, the main character's shoes, played fantastically by Jules Wilcox, who she's like doing everything right that she possibly can to avoid this man, and he just keep coming after her. And then,
it's so frustrating, like on purpose, but it's so incredibly frustrating.
Yes. And then by the end of it, like there's the climax, and there's a moment where she climbs into the attacker's Jeep, and I was screaming at her like, no, don't go in there. You're just trapping yourself in there. But no, she does it. And then what does she do? She takes a fucking crowbar and starts bashing the shit out of him over and over. And I realized all this pent up like tension and anger and frustration that had been building was finally being released. And I was like, yes. And then we get to the literal climax of the film when like she's like, no, you know what? I might die, but I'm going to call your fucking wife because I have your phone right now. I'm going to call your fucking wife and tell her what you have done. And it was literally, and I sent this to Mary Beth too in our DMs, but it was literally, I was literally Trixie and Katya going, ah! Like, that gif was me when that happened. I was like, yes, motherfucker, go down. This is what I want to see. And it was such a... Gosh, it's such an adrenaline rush. I loved that moment. It is like the power of cinema. And I was watching this alone. This wasn't in the theater, but I can only imagine if I had seen it in the theater, my reaction to it. So that's my last one.
It's extremely cathartic.
Isn't it?
And I think it does a really great job of showing that like a woman's catharsis and like that feeling of like a woman getting covered in mud and blood and the relief she feels at the end. Like, I am all for like a gross woman.
Yeah.
And this movie really does that. And it is just so satisfying. And it's like the catharsis that you look for in movies like this without leaning too heavily into exploitation.
Yeah.
Which is appreciated.
I do have to say that I do apologize because back in our episode where we were talking about Maniac Cop, and there's a connection here, I promise. But when we were talking about that, and we were talking about the fact that it is being remade, and we said that the guy that's it was a Refn is producing it, but the other guy that is like show running it his name is John Hyams. Well, I was like, I don't know what he's done. The last thing that I saw that he's like, the thing that everyone was like shouting about is the fact that he did Universal Soldier Day of Reckoning, and I was like, that doesn't really give me much hope. He's the director of this movie. So,
oh,
yeah. So the director of Alone is also directing the Maniac Cop remake. So that gives me a little bit more hope for it.
Awesome. And so
what was your final moment?
I switched it up on you. My final moment. I'm sorry, I keep doing this to you. I had a day where I couldn't make a decision. So my final moment is the mask moment from Host.
Oh,
when she is walking in her living room and sees the filter in the middle of the air. Mm-hmm. And she walks closer and closer and closer. And then all of a sudden it just like turns towards her.
Mm.
And it's a tribute to Alice, Sweet Alice.
Yeah.
Which I still need to see. But this moment just really shows how Host took the things that we've been relying on for comfort and makes it something absolutely fucking terrifying. This moment was so amazing, and I think one of the best shots of the year. I've written about it quite a few times because of how much I just love what it accomplishes. But that is definitely, that whole movie again is full of fucking nuts moments, but I think that one is my favorite.
It's a good moment.
It is a good moment.
It's really good.
Okay, it's the moment y'all have been waiting for. Our top 10.
A top 10.
No, I'm happy. I think I'm happy with mine, but it's just hard.
It's hard. Really hard. And, here's the thing. It's like, I realized how many movies I've seen this year, or how many new movies I've seen this year, and how many that I missed because they're just like a deluge of them. So, like, there are some that, like, I haven't seen. I wanted to watch it before we recorded, and I just didn't have time. I wanted to see La Llorona. I wanted to see a couple of those. I didn't see that
one either, yeah.
A couple of those films that I couldn't make it in. So, like, if it's not on the list, chances are either we probably didn't see it. Because, like, there's just way too many.
And if we saw it and we didn't like it, don't come for us. Well, not even didn't like it. Like, if it's not in our top 10, it does not mean we didn't like it.
No, it doesn't. Because I had, like, 20 movies that I could have easily substituted in for some of these. But, all right. Do you want to start?
All right. Yeah. 10 to 1.
10 to 1.
All right, so my number 10 pick is Gretel and Hansel.
Okay.
Which was Oz. I know, you sound surprised.
No, I wish I had seen it.
Oh, you haven't seen it? Oh my God. So this is Oz Perkins' latest movie. He did The Black Coat's Daughter, which is a favorite of mine. And he did The Pretty Thing That Lives in the House. And he is very good at slow burns. This one is not as much of a slow burn. It's Hansel and Gretel, but it's focused on Gretel, who is played by Sophia Lillis, who we've seen in It. And she is just phenomenal as this kind of tomboyish, just really resourceful young girl who's going up against a witch played really well by Alice Krieg, who, if you've seen Silent Hill, she's like the crazy leader of the cult, and she's really good at playing an evil woman. But it's just this, it's like a visual feast. Every shot is just this gorgeous composition, and some might think it's style over substance, but I don't think that's the case. I think it's both, and it's just an absolutely gorgeous movie that just like, it just took me. It just took my entire body and mind. And so that's why I wanted to give it my number 10 spot, because it's just such a beautiful film to watch and to experience. And it's such a cool twist on the Hansel and Gretel thing. Like, it's not just, oh, another Hansel and Gretel. It's like this really beautiful kind of feminist, not really, I don't know, feminist, but like more like feminist look at it. And Oz Perkins is really good at doing that. Like, he is really good at making these very good female-led horror pieces. At least I love them. I know that he's a little bit divisive because his movies are pretty slow.
I really didn't like Pretty Thing.
I was iffy on it.
I did not like it.
It was really slow.
Yeah. I really liked the scene in that with the phone. The phone cord?
Oh my god, that's so good.
But that is literally the only thing I remember about that movie.
Have you seen
But I did like Black Coats. Yes, I did like that one a lot.
Yeah. I think that he likes to move very slow. And I think The Pretty Thing is just like too slow. But anyway, so that's my number 10 is Gretel and Hansel.
Awesome. I meant to watch that. I just didn't have time.
It's okay.
I'm sad. So my number 10 has changed about 20 times. And this was a last minute change that I changed about like 30 minutes ago. Because at one point it was Alone. At one point it was The Beach House. I'm going to go for kind of a dark horse and say The Mortuary Collection.
Okay, I had a feeling The Mortuary Collection was going to be on your list.
And you know, the thing is that like I love anthology films so much, which is kind of weird because I typically am not attracted to short fiction, like especially like the short stories, like written out ones. Like for some reason, I'd much rather spend a little bit more time with it. But the thing that I like about anthology films, especially good ones, is that it can kind of create these interconnected stories and then weave it in with like an overarching tale. So while we are getting smaller bites of a story, it is in good anthology films, it's tied into the thematic overarching plot. And that is exactly what The Mortuary Collection does. And it also reaches back to things like EC Comics, like the Tales from the Crypt or the Vault of Horror or the Haunt of Fear, this kind of like dark comedy that really resonates with me. I love a good dark comedy, and all of the little gotcha moments in this anthology are some of the best ones I've seen in a long time, especially since like I guess Trick or Treat is like the last one that I saw that like I really enjoyed.
Yeah. Clancy Brown is absolutely perfect.
Oh, he is. If you know,
he's so good.
I'm telling you, if you're going to remake Phantasm, you need to have Clancy Brown as the tall man. I just want to hear him say, boy. But yeah, so like the twist from on like the classic babysitter murder stories to like the uproariously gross and hilarious safe sex segment that is literally about fucking the patriarchy to the wraparound. I loved it. I loved what this is selling. And so I just like last minute is like, fuck it, I'm putting it on my list.
I respect it.
Yeah, so that's my number 10, The Mortuary Collection.
Okay, so my number 9 is The Beach House.
Okay, good.
I really loved The Beach House. We didn't talk about the part in our best moments, but we'll talk about it now. The footworm, when she pulls it out. Talk about amazing. But I think it wasn't just that part, but it's got this like cosmic horror vibe to it that I am a sucker for cosmic horror. But there's a shot when Emily is sitting on the beach and the older guy, Mitch, who they're in this beach house with, just starts walking into the ocean, and you just see this wide shot of the beach, and it's this stark colored sand against the blue of the ocean. And it's this like very deliberately slow scene of watching him walk into the water. And that scene has just like been playing over and over in my head. It is absolutely gorgeous to watch. And it's a moment in a film that starts moving pretty quickly. It slows down to kind of really let you sit in the moment and realize like something fucking weird is happening.
Yeah.
And everything is about to go down. And that's right after that the foot scene happens. But it's this really creepy calm before the storm. So I think this movie is really well paced. I think the story is really unique, and I can't wait to watch it again because I just was very taken by it.
Yeah, it's one of those like I said, it was going to be on my list, and it actually was in a couple different places on my list, to be perfectly honest. Before I decided to say fuck everything and throw my list up in despair. But I was contemplating putting Sea Fever or this one on, and to me, this one, so was I. This one kind of inches out Sea Fever because of the emotional story. Like, I'm always drawn to that emotional beat a lot more instead of the more clinical scientific side of things. And the pairing in this movie of the kind of old couple that is seeing an uncertain future with the wife that's dealing with cancer, and the man that is like, trying to make her last moments pleasant, with the young couple where they're also facing an uncertain future because she wants to pursue college. He wants to just lounge around and like enjoy life. And so like seeing that dichotomy right there and the way that it unfolds before you even enter the cosmic horror just really did something for me. So I'm glad that this is on your list.
Yeah, I think they do a really good job of forging those emotional connections before jumping into the horror. So it makes the stakes all the more. And
then it just doesn't let up.
All the much higher. No, it does not let up.
It is a slow burn in like the actual sense of the word, where it has that fuse that is slowly burning the entire time, and it doesn't let up.
Yeah. So that's my number 9. What's your number 9?
A funny segue, also about exploding, but not like in the same. I don't know. There's a segue here. Someone will be able to figure it. My number 9 is Spontaneous.
Okay. I haven't seen this. I've heard so much about it, but I have not seen this yet.
It's a young adult movie about a high school couple that are finding each other and falling in love while there is some kind of sickness going around that makes people pop. And when I say pop,
sorry.
When I say pop, I mean like that the one woman in Cloverfield popping. Like
okay, so it's like spontaneous combustion, basically?
It's spontaneous combustion, except the person just like pops with like a spray of blood.
Ew!
And the way Spontaneous weaponizes the traditional young adult story, like the beginning is full of characters that seem just a little bit too wise and are, it has all those young adult tropes. But hiding under it is this threat of spontaneous combustion, which the film then takes as a metaphor to examine teenage fears living today with like the idea that violence could erupt at any moment and there's nothing you can do as a teenager to stop it. So it kind of is a stand-in for like, people coming through and shooting up a school. Like that kind of tension is in every single scene. And there is a moment where multiple people just start popping one after another. And the fear and the horror of the situation is like, oh, it is such a powerful moment that like just like had me jumping every single time someone would pop. And it is mean. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It turns into a harrowing exploration of what it means to survive high school. And like,
wow, okay.
It's really good. It's it's something else. And, it also surprised me because like Brian Duffield, I think is how you say his last name. He wrote and directed this based on a novel. And he also got story credit for Underwater. He wrote the core story for Love and Monsters, the young adult Dylan O'Brien monster movie that came out this year. And he also wrote the original Babysitter, that Babysitter Killer
Damn.
Queen is based on. So like this year alone, he got story credits, if not like screenplay credits done for like 4 really big movies. He's having quite a year.
Good for him.
But this movie, I'm telling you, it surprised the absolute fuck out of me. I went into it expecting, it knows what it wants to do, because like even the characters, you have Catherine Langford, you know, who was in like 13 Reasons Why, and she was in Love, Simon, and you have Charlie Plummer, who again was in that Looking for Alaska. Like it is casting, it is relying on a lot of like young adult character actors, young adult like tropes, and then it just sort of says fuck you, and
Hell yeah.
it's really good. So that's my number
Cool.
9, Spontaneous.
Awesome. So, okay, my number 8, found footage. Surprise, surprise. Murder, Death, Koreatown.
I meant to see this one too.
I will not shut the fuck up about this movie. Everyone knows it. So, Murder, Death, Koreatown is a very weird thing. It is not just like a movie. It's like a phenomenon. It's very strange. So it started out as this thread on 4chan about a guy whose friend sent him this VHS tape of him investigating this murder and thinking discovering it's a conspiracy theory. And from there, it has become this movie where it is something between found footage and true crime. And it's like, I describe it as David Lynch found footage. Like, it gets fucking weird. But so I bought the Blu-ray, and it came in a package where the return address was cut out of it. And it is like very much like bootleg, weird. And then I bought, I didn't buy actually, I won a VHS tape of it in this like random contest. I haven't gotten it yet, but there's like 6 different versions. And one of the like a couple of the versions are like filmed over like 9/11 newscasts and like
Oh, Jesus.
Jim Jones. And so they have like really leaned into this bit of like bootleg, weird VHS, gritty, real. And so, and they're really leaning into that, like that idea of it being real, but it is really good. It's something, it is fucking something. And again, it's David Lynch found footage, which it should convince most people. And it's something special, I think. I mean, I don't even have a VHS player, and I wanted to win this VHS. Like, that shit doesn't happen, but now I have it, and it's gonna, again, like, I thought I tweeted about this, but I tweeted a picture of the envelope and was like, I think I just bought a snuff film.
Seriously.
Like, it looks like you're buying a snuff film. And I love that kind of, like, weird marketing around found footage, and this is, like, it's not viral necessarily, but it's such a good vibe around it. It makes it so much more creepy.
And it is playing on Prime still. I just looked it up.
Yes, streaming on Prime, so you can watch it in quite a few places, and buy the Blu-ray from their weird website. But they're all really nice. I was emailing with them, and they're very sweet. They're very cool. So whoever it is,
Was
hey,
it the director
they're good.
you were talking to? Or?
They didn't say.
Because that would be.
They won't. Oh, they won't. I don't think they will.
Oh, is it unknown?
I want to ask, but I think because it's like a little bit of a mystery, I don't think they want. I wouldn't think that he would maybe want to appear on a podcast, because the whole thing is it's supposed to be like his friend made it and he is just sharing it. So I don't know.
That'd
Anyway.
be interesting.
I know, but so that's my number 8, and I put this on a couple lists. Like I got to do a list for RogerEbert.com, which was amazing, and I put this on my list, and I'm like, I'm gonna throw this dark horse in here because everyone needs to see this movie, and then it is just so good. So, and even if you don't like found footage, you might like it. So I just think you should give it a try.
Yeah, it's on my list. After you've like been praising it nonstop, so I'm going to watch it. I promise. My number 8 is She Dies Tomorrow.
That's on my list, but I won't tell you where.
Okay. You know, it's one of those movies where I enjoyed it on my first watch, but I wouldn't say that I loved it. It really it confused me, it unsettled me and my expectations. Because like it was changing tones and changing characters and changing stories, and I didn't know whether to be repulsed or like laughing at the situations. And I asked myself, am I supposed to be laughing at this? Because I don't know. And that's, again, going back to like my sensibilities, I love dark comedy that you don't know whether you should be laughing or not. And it was when I watched Amy Seimetz, the writer director of this, her debut film, The Sun Don't Shine, and it clicked for me. And so it goes from the main character Amy Googling about leather coats, how to tan leather, and eventually how to make herself into a leather coat. And it was at this moment that I'm like, I don't know how to react to this, because it's really funny, but it's also like really fucked up. But I love that this movie, while it's obviously resonating on some level because of COVID and the situation that we find ourselves in, that it was instead originally supposed to be about like how information travels and how the idea of the concept of like fake news no longer really applies if people start to believe in it. Mm-hmm. It just like the way that this travels and it infects other people, and all of a sudden for no reason whatsoever, they just are all believing, yep, I'm going to die tomorrow, is like social commentary at its finest. And it walks that fine line of dark comedy so fucking well that this probably could have been higher on my list. Yeah, I don't know. I love this movie a lot.
I will offer more of my thoughts when we get to it on my list. I don't want to say too much quite yet because it's on my list.
Yep. So that's number 8 for me. She Dies Tomorrow.
Cool. So my number 7 is The Invisible Man.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it would be higher up on my list, but there's a couple more that are just in my head stuck out more. But Invisible Man. We've all talked about it. We've all heard about it. Elizabeth Moss is so good in it, and it just really captures that feeling. This feeling of complete and utter helplessness and fear when you have a dangerous ex, and it shook me to my core because I have experience with a dangerous ex. And I saw it by myself and walked home from the theater. I live really close to the movie theater, and I was shaking. And when I got home, I cried and just had to take a minute. And I mean, I know that's a very visceral reaction, but it just captured this whole narrative of being terrified, but then reclaiming it and never giving up and finally getting what you want and revenge on that person. And it was just told so well and takes that property, The Invisible Man, and makes it into something so relevant for 2020. And I know that people are worried about that, but just Elizabeth Moss, favorite Scientologist, is so good in this movie. And it's just like, you can feel her desperation off the screen. And I just loved every moment of it and also hated every moment of it in a good way. And yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite of the year.
Cool.
What's your number 7?
My number 7 is After Midnight. I saw this movie last year, and it's one that like, it was just very pleasant. It was a very like cozy, it's a very warm movie.
It is.
For a movie that is about like a man shooting at some unseen creature. I think that it is probably Jeremy Gardner's like most accomplished film yet.
Yeah.
I love that it's also punctuated with some very fantastic supporting performances by like Henry Zebrowski, who is so funny.
I love him so. I listened to Last Podcast on the Left rather religiously.
And do you?
Yes, I'm obsessed with it. And seeing him in this role was so funny because I'm so used to him being like foul-mouthed little imp boy. And he's a foul-mouthed little imp boy. And so in this, he was not that. And it's just like I love him. And it was just cool to see him in a movie.
He was so good in this, and his relationship with Jeremy Gardner's character was really good, and it felt real and lived in, like they could actually be really good friends that actually really cared for each other. And it wasn't like a no homo type thing or something like that. They just have like genuine feelings for each other. And
yes, I love that. And like I've talked about this a lot with Steve and how there need to be more genuine male friendships on screen that aren't like gay. It just like, it's so endearing and so warm to see two men who really care about each other because they're good friends. Like their friendship is deep and meaningful, and that's really crucial that we see more of that kind of thing. And so I was really, really excited to see that kind of friendship in this movie.
Me too. And also it had Justin Benson in it, who is a great indie director.
Yeah.
And like, he's playing kind of a dickish character, but like another really good, interesting character that adds a dimension to the film. And then of course it also set off the year of Brea Grant with her performance.
Yes.
And it's one of those things, like, we talked to her about this, but it's like, even though she's not in this film a whole lot, her and her character and the scenes that she is in leaves such like an umbrella and like a pall over like the entire production, that just like this movie is more about her character than it is about anything else. And
Yeah.
it's as much of her film as it is Jeremy, even though Jeremy is in pretty much every single scene. It is, I love this movie. I think it is just, it's one that like I had to put on the list because it just makes me happy.
Yeah, it is like a warm blanket.
And in a year of like I'm looking at what's coming up in my list, and like, this is like the antithesis of everything else that like it made it on my list.
Yeah, mine doesn't get mine's just dark as shit.
Yeah.
Speaking of dark as shit, my number 6 is The Dark and the Wicked.
Oh, okay.
So, Brian Bertino is a personal favorite of mine. He did The Strangers, he did The Monster, and he did a found footage movie called Mockingbird, which is a movie that I watched and jumped so hard I tweaked my neck.
I remember.
Yes, and so this king of nihilism is back with The Dark and the Wicked, which is absolutely fucking brutal and nihilistic to the like nihilism. If you've ever seen it, it's just a family gets targeted by a dark force, and there's no rhyme or reason. They're just like, eh. It's almost like The Strangers because you were home. It was like because you were around. Just the way that things take such a fucking turn for the worst in this movie is, whoo boy. And then so it's a brother and a sister go visit their parent or their dying dad, and her mom was like, "Don't come here." I'm like, "We're gonna come anyway," and she was like, "Ooh, bad choice." But Marin Ireland, who plays the sister Louise, is so amazing in this movie.
So good.
I mean, she's screaming, she's like terrified, she's trying to be strong. It's all of these like, she's getting hit with like moment after moment of just absolute despair, and it looked exhausting, and she looks exhausted, but like in the way that is appropriate for this movie. One of my favorite moments of the year was going to be when the mom chops her fingers off. Which is pretty intense. When she chops her fingers off.
Between that and like the chopping of the fingers off and like the collar out of space, it has been a year for people's fingers.
Right? And there's this moment when I think the mom walks into like the barn, and it's just quiet and it's creepy. And Brian Bertino is just really good at what he does, and what he does is fucked up nihilism. Nothing is good. And for me, I like that. For me, that's everything. And this started me down a hole of like watching all of his movies again, and like, you know, he's only made 4, but I think he's got a pretty
What a
good
4 though.
What a 4 for sure. So yes, that is my number 6. What about you?
My number 6 is Host.
Okay, cool. That's on my list too, but we'll get there.
You know, I'm on record that I'm not exactly a found footage aficionado, and even if I was, there's no way between the two of us I could ever take that crown.
You would have to really get started. Like I feel like if you were to come and take that crown, I would be very impressed, and I'd say you deserve that.
Yeah. Oh my God. Can you imagine? No. But like what works for me is that it's so sleek and it's so mean. It knew what it wanted to do, and it did it with reckless abandon for about 56 or 57 minutes. It introduced characters with more character in the slight running time than a movie twice its length has been able to do. They felt like a bunch of friends. It felt real. And then the scares happened, and the way that it uses Zoom, something that everyone over the last year has become intimately familiar with, and turning it into something that is like a vehicle for scary moments is just like, it's fantastic. I mean, you talked about the moment with the mask in one of your favorite moments, and that was a great moment for me. It was the use of the zoom background with the character,
Oh my God.
like slamming her face in it, like, hello, jumping while I'm trying to like take notes about the stupid movie. Like, I loved this. I love this movie. And what I really dug about it was like the moments that we talked about with Rob Savage in an earlier episode, where it was these moments of there's something in a scene that a lot of people missed.
Yes.
And for like one particular instance was a pair of legs that are casually floating in the background that like a lot of people didn't even see. And he even said that a lot of people don't bring that scene up to him. But it's like moments of like that where you catch something, you're like, oh, what else am I missing? And so you start to like, it trains you to be like combing the background of this film, trying to find something. And so when something happens, it hits you even more. This movie, I loved it. I think it is the perfect movie for COVID. It is so good. And I think it's a movie that we'll be talking about. I don't think like some movies that are filmed in COVID, I think this one will have legs because it works. It works in the same way that like the Unfriended movies did. So that is my number 6.
I will share all of my feelings when we get to it. I don't want to give away any of my feelings.
Yes. No.
So, okay, we're at the halfway point. My number 5, it is Swallow.
Okay.
Swallow. So we're getting to the point in my list where like it's hard to figure out which one is higher than the other. But so Swallow is my number 5, and I wrote a lot about this movie. I didn't shut up about this movie for a while. Haley Bennett plays a pregnant woman who develops pica, which is the eating of non-edible stuff. So like thumbtacks, marbles. And it is, well, one reason I particularly love it is because it portrays OCD in a very, very different way than it usually is, which is amazing. OCD is usually a joke. It's a punchline. It is like, oh, ha, 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 look, they wash their hands a lot, but doesn't address like the need in OCD. Like, a lot of it is a need for control. And that's a lot of this movie is her need for control. And she is this woman who wants to be the perfect housewife and realizes that that's not something that I think she wants or can handle. And also gets into this really, really intense conversation about being a child from a very fucked up situation and how that has affected her entire life. And so I think this is not only a really well written movie, but it's beautiful to watch, especially
it's gorgeous.
The home that she lives in with her husband is like absolutely gorgeous and breathtaking, and the set design is amazing, and the costume design is amazing, and it does a really amazing job of setting up this like veneer of perfection and need to have everything a very particular way and then shifting that towards the end. But this movie really, really struck a chord within me due to its depiction of OCD and how it depicted OCD in a woman. Again, a lot of the time OCD is shown in men. So this is one of the first instances of which I saw OCD portrayed in a female character, and how OCD is used to show her and how she uses it to kind of reject patriarchal control. So that movie really just grabbed me by the heart. So
it's really good. It's really good.
I don't know if it's considered technically like as genre as others on this list, but I'm considering it horror.
No, it's horror. It really is. It is about it's about the same things that horror movies are about. It's talking about the idea of body horror and the idea of like that kind of compulsion, and just I mean, you know me, I'm not a huge stickler for what people want to call or not call horror. I think it's a boring discussion, but like, no, I absolutely think that is a horror movie. I would include it as such. Absolutely. It is so good. I should have included it on my list. Like, I'm kind of kicking myself for not doing that.
There's too many good movies. There's too much good cinema.
Yeah.
So what is your number 5?
My number 5 is The Invisible Man.
Okay, cool.
It's like I'm not really. A lot of times studio films anymore I can take or leave, but like when it is executed to the perfection that The Invisible Man is, like it is the perfect kind of bigger budget non-indie film because it takes ideas that an indie film would explore and is able to add that kind of bigger budget sheen to them in a way that you don't see done in bigger budget films coming out of a studio.
Well, and Lee Whannell, who did it, like, is kind of, I mean, he's done a lot of, like, he did Saw and Insidious, but still, like, he has a little bit of that, like, indie horror vibe about him, and I think he definitely brought that kind of perspective to this bigger release.
Well, and I'm also very, I think I'm very, I guess, appreciative that Blumhouse and Universal were allowed him to take this very old property and give it this very potent metaphor behind it. And I think that Lee has done an incredible job of establishing himself as an accomplished director, almost to the same degree that, you know, his partner, his directing partner and friend James Wan is. Like, you can see his progress. Like when Upgrade came out, I was like, oh, this is a different movie for that Lee is doing. But like, you can see the progress from the way that he staged that film and shot it to using those same techniques here in this Universal Studios picture. And I love it. I love the way that it used the Invisible Man storyline as a way to explore the way that an abuser can isolate and destroy their victims' lives without being seen. And just that whole presence behind it is just, oh God, this movie is, it's so good. It's such a powerful metaphor for abuse.
So good. I know. And again, like you said, I'm so glad they let him take that route and like change it a lot, but with that same kind of conceit. I really am so glad.
And it's just dressed up in this slick mass market studio film. And I love that because you don't see that very often.
Yeah.
So that is why this one is my number 5.
Cool.
What about you for number 4?
So my number 4 is Host.
All right.
I love Host.
Do you?
So much. I have written ad nauseum about this fucking movie. I've written like 3 articles about this fucking movie because it is so good. It is the perfect movie for 2020. It was made in isolation by Rob Savage. It was made completely over Zoom. And it is like this phenomenal testament to like the creativity of this year. And, you know, despite these horrific circumstances and how things were halted, he was able to make one of the scariest movies of the year. And like, this guy just burst onto the goddamn scene. Like, the short that he made on Twitter, which was the inspiration for this, was so good. And it was a prank that he played on the people who played the characters in Host, because he's friends with everybody that's in the cast. And so he did this prank call where he's like, oh, there's something in my attic, come with me. And he pretended that like something jumped out of his attic and everyone was like, holy shit, Rob, are you okay? And so it evolved into what Host is. And Host, it's just everything I love about found footage. And like you said, Terry, it takes the pandemic, but also doesn't make it like so front and center with the pandemic. I think there's a lot of quarantine movies that are like going really hard and into like, it's quarantine, it's quarantine, it's quarantine. And this one was more like some friends hanging out and chatting. And you felt like one of them. And this was a movie that really played well watching it on your laptop. I know there's a lot of like people talking about like, oh, movie theaters and stuff, but this was so good on a laptop. You felt like you were in the Zoom call with them. And it takes the traditional possession narratives and has it go digital. It literally goes viral, like, as they say. Like, it transfers through the computers, and there's just this movie should just prove, I know, it's ridiculous. This movie should prove to so many people that the found footage genre is so much more than just shaky cam.
Yeah.
And I know people might not consider this found footage because it's not like, oh, they found it in a trash can. But it's still second screen horror like this, and Unfriended is considered found footage, I think, because it's like you are watching a digital archive of this, basically. So it definitely falls into that area, and it's because found footage is evolving with the digital age, and found footage is on the forefront of all of these technologies. Like, Host is one of the first quarantine movies to come out, and it's found footage. And, you know, I'm on my soapbox, as per usual. But it's just like, I just think that this really does show how creative genre directors are and how they never give up, and how we have, you know, we can switch away from like big, beautiful Hollywood blockbusters to grainy Zoom footage, and it still scares the shit out of you. Like all the things in the background. It's just, it's a movie that you watch multiple times and you just really get a lot out of it. So,
well, and that short running time absolutely doesn't hurt.
Oh my God, it doesn't
either.
hurt at all. And that's what I love. It's like short, it's to the point, and like they knew it. And that's really important, crucial that they knew not to take it.
And yet
any
you get a
longer.
feel for these characters.
You really do. They do such a good job of like that really quick intro of like, hey, like everyone logging onto a Zoom, like a capture, like, hey, everyone, hey. And like everyone has their personalities. And I think it definitely helps that all of these women or all these people are friends in real life and like know each other. I think that really lends really well to the chemistry that they have in this movie. But yeah, it like takes like less than 5 minutes to establish who these people are. And it's just
Happy spookies.
oh, happy spookies. Oh my God, this movie is just so special.
It's really good. It's really damn
good. And it's
good.
going to be a relic of 2020 filmmaking and how you do it the right way. And yes, it is like very much, it's putting itself in a very specific context with Zoom, but it's going to be a relic of this year, which is shit. But it is, again, a glimmering light in a year that was so hard for people to be creative. So
yeah,
I'm done. Love this movie.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that it's not a little bit higher on your list, honestly.
I know. We'll get into the other three. It was hard to pick, but the other three that we're going to talk about had like a deep, deep emotional impact on me.
Yeah.
And while Host is like very special, I think the three above it have had a much deeper emotional impact. And I think, like you said, that emotional impact is what I really go for in a genre movies. So it got knocked down a couple spots.
Yeah, and we're going to see that with the rest of mine too as we start to go in my last final four. It's that like it's the ones that really affected me on an emotional level for the most part. Like my number 4, which is The Swerve.
Oh my God, Terry, I forgot The Swerve came out this year. I should have put it on my list.
I'm I struggled as to where this should go on my list, and I know some people have again questioned whether this is a horror movie or not, but it is absolutely a fucking horror movie. And even if you don't think so, I don't care.
Yeah,
this is
exactly
my list, because this movie is staged like a horror movie. It is scored like a horror movie, and it is about the horrors of life. And it's I know you and we both saw this last year. And it's been like, gosh, the year and a half since I saw it. It has lingered in my head more than any other film that I have seen in the last 2 years. It's the film that I was probably one of the most excited for people to discover, and the more and more people started to watch it the last half of this year, especially in the last couple months, I saw it was like, yes, this is validation that this movie is the emotional gut punch that I think it is. And so when I revisited it both for like podcast prep for our interview with Dean, the director, Dean Kapsalis, it's a great episode about Black Christmas, and you should go listen to it if you haven't.
Please, so good.
When I watched it, it still resonated with me, and boy, I'm telling you, I don't know what to say about this film other than just the way it slowly tightens the screws is the best example of what a slow burn can do. And by the time you reach the end and you are seeing the events of the previous hour start to like unfold, it's like when someone hits those dominoes and you just see it and there's nothing you can do to stop it.
I know.
It is horrific. It is sad. It is phenomenally acted.
Oh, Azura Sky.
Oh, deserves all of the awards.
I want her to get nominated for an Oscar. It's not going to happen.
It's not,
but I want it to happen. It should.
This is one that, again, it will linger in your head, and for me, it stayed there for. I mean, we're going to be going on like a year and a half now since I saw it.
Yeah.
I love this film.
It
so
is
much.
amazing. Yeah. Another difficult film to watch, but I think a crucial film to watch about the horrors of being a woman and the horrors of mental health. I think there's something to be said about movies that might not be traditionally horrific, but want to take horrifying subject matter and put it in the light. I think that's an important part of horror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. Jesus. It gave me a stomach ache. In more ways than so moving on to number 3. My number 3 is Relic.
Okay. Wow.
I know. I kept switching things around. I couldn't decide. It was a nightmare. But Relic, oh boy. Wow. Natalie Erica James, who directed, this is her debut feature film, Rude. We got, we've been lucky to talk to a lot of directors on our list. It's not influencing our list, but we've been really lucky to chat with some of them. But she just created this absolutely gorgeous metaphor for aging and intergenerational trauma that tapped into a specific fear of mine, just getting lost in your own home and making something so scary and sad, and it really does an amazing balancing act between empathy and like tender emotional awareness and horror in a way that's not exploitative. Like, think Deborah Logan, taking a Deborah Logan is actually something she talked about as being an inspiration, is wanting to kind of walk that line between horror and empathy, because a lot of films that deal with the elderly, like the aging process, are quite exploitative and pretty intense. And this one really walks that line and really creates a beautiful look at 3 generations of women and what you can inherit from them and what that means. Yeah. I watched it twice in like a week, and it sucker punched me both times.
Yeah.
It's absolutely breathtaking.
It's really good.
I'm assuming it's higher on your list, so you'll tell me more later. What's your number 3?
That's kind of the problem, right? It's like
I know.
You can start to like figure out what is coming up because we get quiet.
I know, you're like, I won't talk about it. But what's your number 3, Terry?
My number 3 is The Dark and the Wicked.
Oh hell yeah! Oh my god! Yay! I like how we have so many of the same ones in weird different spaces. But
I know.
Oh, okay.
I
was wondering because you got quiet. I'm like, is he?
God, I hated that movie. I don't know why it's on the list.
I was like, there's no way he hated that movie. There's no way. We talked about that movie ad nauseum. Anyway,
I know, and we really wanted to talk to Brian Bertino. He doesn't do press for his movies. We found out.
Brian, please just talk to me. Just talk to us.
We don't even have to talk about this movie.
Fun. We can talk about the movie.
We can talk about a movie that scared you as a kid, and that's it.
Yeah.
It could just be that.
Brian, please.
If you're listening to this, I described The Dark and the Wicked in my review as a kind of like a sister piece to The Strangers, because both operate on a similar premise of a family at the fraying point of their relationship and or life. Both films isolate the family. Both films set forth an outside presence that
Vroom, vroom, vroom.
Man, you set up on this momentum and then some motherfucker just drives by. So both set up this outside presence that delights in tormenting and picking apart the family. And one of the things I said in my review is that it's a home invasion of a different sort, one that swaps a burlap sack for an even more desolate creature, the kind that creeps in with the shadows and lingers. And this movie is about this force that is so desolate and so bleak. It is soul-sucking in a very callous way. The conclusion is the exact definition of nihilistic. There is no hope. There is nothing to look forward to. This is it's so God, it's so fucking dark, and even without being at anything at all about COVID and the 2020, it feels like a movie that exemplifies the terror of living in 2020 more than any other film I've seen this year, and that's saying something. It's this movie, just from the setting, like the other thing that like really I mean, right now, I mean, I've talked about this a little bit on the show that like I'm kind of in a transient nature right now, helping with my parents. And so I'm living in a very rural part of the country. And so a movie about this sort of like rural family is like really, it really like hit me in a different way as well. And just seeing the end of this kind of like life on this very like rural area just really like it did something for me. This movie is I think it is honestly the most bleak movie I've ever seen because of that. And these last three movies are movies that like really hit hard. So that's my number 3. The Dark and the Wicked.
My number 2 is She Dies Tomorrow.
Oh, awesome.
I know, it was really high on the list. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much this movie, I can't stop thinking about it and how much I adored it. How much I adore this like super existential look at wanting to live your last day to the fullest. This just like how everyone experiences this grief differently and how it's funny in such a fucked up way. And when we talked to Amy, she was like, oh yeah, like I've got a fucked up sense of humor. And I love that. I just love this approach to death and contagion in this darkly comedic way. And I think it makes it feel all the more kind of, I don't know if real is the right word, but it feels human. And it's just this, I can't even put it into words how much this movie just like got me to my soul and how much this movie just like took over my thoughts and my feelings about 2020. I mean, like it wasn't made for 2020, but like this current this current like global climate, but it feels so relevant. And it feels so relevant to like growing up and like the fear of getting older and what'll happen and like what's going to happen to you. And there so many beautiful moments of like use of color. And there's a moment where a woman is swimming in a pool and she's just bleeding in the pool and is like serenely swimming around while she's dying. And it is just, while 2 women are just watching her from the side. And there's something about this kind of serenity around death that I appreciated and really hadn't thought a lot about, because death scares a lot of people, but like death scares the shit out of me. And this serenity around the idea of death and trying to make it kind of funny in a fucked up way, like the leather jacket, like that was favorite. It was so good.
It was so
like,
good.
It's so ridiculous, but it's just
the character of Amy spends so much time in the beginning, like trying to feel something real. Like she's rubbing against the wood on the ground and she's, going outside and like exploring nature. And the idea that like, shit, what's going to happen when I'm gone? That's sort of like, there's nothing, you can't take like me like a tree, chop me down and turn me into a house that is going to be lasting something. It's like, I have nothing. If I am gone, there's nothing. And so the idea that she takes that to the next step of like, well, maybe I can turn myself into a coat. It's like, it is that darkly comedic tone that just, it works so well.
Yeah. Another thing that was really effective in that movie is the use of music. Like there's these like deep moments when she's digging her hands into the dirt and then it immediately cuts off with like the phone ringing. And this movie is serious, but Steinmetz never takes it too seriously. She makes sure to inject it with these like interruptions that are like kind of funny, but also just jarring. Yeah. And it's like a trippy indie art house movie, but also it's aware of what it is. And so this movie just it really has a very special place in my heart.
Yeah, it was one that like it kept floating around in position on my list, and I'm so glad that it like connected with you so highly.
The thing I'm realizing about a lot of these movies this year, and I need to look back at my top 10 from last year, but like I'm looking at movies that like made me cry, like like I picked movies that like punched me in the heart. At least for my top 5, it was just like, this was the year of me getting very emotionally invested and connected to these movies. And I feel like that makes, like, it's probably for most people, but yeah, Anyway, what's your number 2, Terry?
So we have 2 left, and they kept flip-flopping in ranks, and I knew what was going to be. I knew from the very beginning what was going to be my top 2 films, but I didn't really know the order until about like maybe 20 minutes before we started recording. My number 2 is Possessor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
For the longest time, I thought it was going to be my number 1.
Okay.
But, you know, we love a plot twist.
We love a plot twist. I've been throwing them at you all night. So
I know. And, you know, what's funny is that as I was writing my little paragraph note for this, I was talking about how I decided to change it when I was writing down my thoughts on The Beach House, a movie that was supposed to be on my list that ended up not being on my list. So double plot twist. But in The Beach House, and I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier about how the reason that if I was going to put it on my list, The Beach House would have been on it and Sea Fever wouldn't, was that I'm more drawn to the kind of emotional story. And that is why this is not my number 1 film. You guys can probably figure out what my number 1 is at this point. But, anyway, Possessor. It's a cold story. It's about cold people doing cold things. And I love that it is such a delicious critique of the way that people and corporations puppet each other, both literally and figuratively. The way that the movie is structured it shows the various ways in which we as a society control other things. We have Tasia Voss's her kid that is messing around with the programming language that can make a model puppet dance, to having Christopher Abbott's Colin, whose job is to look through consumers' cameras to see what kinds of drapes they buy as a way of like controlling and understanding buying habits in order to, again, puppet people, to the mysterious company that Andrea Riseborough's Voss works for. It's like this movie is all about this kind of corporate culture and the way in which we all try to exhibit and try to put control on other things. And I think it's fascinating. I loved the mental body horror that is going on. You talked about it in your kind of like the scenes that stuck out to you. But the thing that it also kind of jumped out at me was the exploration of gender, particularly in the very explicit sex scene that is like erotic and fascinating, with the top half being Voss's body and the bottom half being Christopher Abbott's character, Colin, and his very erect member. It is like, this movie is a tremendous film about a sociopath learning to be a sociopath, and I loved it. I think it is a fantastic movie that could have just as easily been my number 1.
Well, obviously that's pretty obvious about what my number 1 is, but still.
What is your number 1?
My number 1 is Possessor. I watched this movie, and when it was over, I couldn't move. I just laid there. I was like, what do I even do with myself now? It was like before Possessor and after Possessor. This movie, like, Brandon Cronenberg is a force to watch out for. Like, don't think about his dad. Like, just watch his movies. Like, he has such a distinct voice about the future and identity. And I also think I have a crush on Andrea Riseborough and Christopher Abbott. So, like, that might have partially influenced my decision here. But there's just, like, this really beautiful melding of both modern futuristic technology and archaic technology. Like, there are these moments. This is a film about infiltrating. It's mental terrorism, and you are infiltrating the minds of other people, making them do bad things, and then popping out. It's like difficult. It's like impossible to trace. But then there's these moments when, like, they're going into the mind that have these, like, very kind of analog, archaic looking interfaces, and it's just such a fascinating weaving of those elements together, and it really makes you think about identity and who you are. And what starts out as this really, it seems like this very interesting look at Tasia trying to understand who she is, and then she finds out who she is in a very violent way. And it's again, it's another example of a movie where a woman isn't just good or bad. Like, she's complicated and complex, and she's something full of just weirdness. And I appreciated that so fucking much. And just, it's beautiful to watch. it is this like such a weird thing that is my favorite movie of the year. It's just so fucking good.
It is so fucking good.
It is so fucking good. And again, like with a lot of these movies in my top 5, like it drilled its way into my brain and just had this like lasting effect about considering identity and who you are in the world and what it means to be yourself and like what happens when someone else takes over your brain and these identities meld and come together. And I don't know. It's a very interesting kind of identity film looking at what does it mean to be you and what makes you you.
Yeah.
Anyway. And what's your number one, Terry?
My number one, what is my number one? I don't know what my number one is. It might just be a movie called Relic.
Yay.
You know,
oh my God fucking Relic. It's so fucking good.
What I love about this film and kind of this new kind of trajectory of horror is that horror doesn't come from mental illness. Horror is instead used to explore mental illness.
Yes.
And we saw that a bit in like The Babadook, and we saw that in Hereditary. We're seeing this new line of movies that, because like, I mean, obviously there has been a history of the way that horror has manipulated mental illness to be like an evil thing. Whereas recently we're seeing kind of the opposite flip of that coin, where again, it's horror, but it's used to understand and to use horror as a metaphor for exploring these different aspects of our psyche. This movie, I mean, I think I talked about it a little bit when we did interview Natalie, but like, I'm someone that comes from a family who has experienced dementia. My grandmother had it. I remember the first time that she told us that someone came into her apartment and hit her on the back of her head.
Yeah.
And that's not what happened. It's just, it was a moment of her brain shutting down and her falling and hurting herself, and then realizing that she has dementia, and then seeing it again in other members of my family. It's this sort of like realization watching this movie of like what your potential future might look like.
Yeah.
And the way that this film ends on such a note of these 3 generations of women really understanding and coming to grips with what is living beneath that horror is like, whew, I cried so hard when I finished this movie. And I'm getting teared up right now.
Oh no, it's, I was gonna say, I love you.
It's an emotional movie, and
it is though. But that's something special about it, that it makes you feel that like that strongly. And I think that's what's so crucial about horror, and how horror is shifting in a trajectory like this. And don't be calling it elevated horror, because that's not what we're saying here.
No.
Absolutely the fuck not. But it's the way that new filmmakers are approaching like the usual topics of horror, but in a much more thoughtful way.
Yeah.
That hits you differently. It's not just about scaring you, but it's about like reflecting on your own personal experiences and realizing how scary those experiences are and seeing yourself on screen. And I think your experience with Relic is a testament to this year's films and like what stuck out to us, and films that really like got us and made us cry and hit us in spots that we probably didn't expect.
No. And how dare Natalie come out swinging with this film? Like, this is like a fucking masterpiece, and she needs to be like celebrated as much as Jordan Peele is, and as much as Ari Aster is, and as much as Eggers is, the Witch director. I can't ever remember his first name because there's another guy named Eggers that is not him.
Robert Eggers, I believe.
Yeah, and then there's also...
I always want to call him Roger. Oops.
I always want to call him, I think, David, because I think there's a David Eggers that is an author that wrote...
Yes.
He wrote that one book that I had to read in college. Why can't I figure it out? I don't know what it was. He wrote some book. A heartbreaking work of a staggering genius. It was a memoir. I had to read that in a memoir class in college. Yeah, so like I always get him their two first names confused, so I never can remember if it's Roger. But anyway, the point being that she needs to be discussed in the same breath as people talk about Robert Edgar or talk about Jordan Peele or talk about Ari Aster. It is a phenomenal debut film. It's unfair that she could come out swinging with such emotional and also like horrific grit. It's a great movie. It is my favorite of the year. I think it'll be a movie that I think about for many years to come.
Exactly. And again, she's coming out swinging like Ari Aster did with the Hereditary and like Eggers did with The Witch. And she really does deserve to be considered one of these like must listen to, must continue to support voices in horror, because she is going to do amazing things.
Yeah.
She is going to create phenomenal movies. And I cannot wait to see where she goes. And listen to our episode with her. We talk about The Tale of Two Sisters. It's really good. And she's a joy.
She's just wonderful.
It's always so funny when we talk to these directors and I'm like, oh, starstruck. And they're like, I'm just a human being who like is shocked that anyone watched my movie. And I'm like, I love you so much. Your brain. Let me examine it.
Let me just like pick at it.
I know. But wow. What a year.
What a year. It has been.
A fucking year.
It has been a year. It has been an emotional up and down of a year. And I think, I honestly think it's so weird because most of these movies were made virus. And yet they're coming out in a year that feels like a perfect year for these types of films, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I also feel like we're all much more vulnerable this year. And I think we're all being much more open about that vulnerability because everyone is feeling vulnerable and realizing like, oh, talking about your feelings this year is a good outlet. Like, and to be vulnerable, I keep saying vulnerable, but like show that side of yourself. And I think these movies are helpful, at least for, it seems like both of us, to break down that vulnerability and like really let us process it. Like writing about these movies I'm pretty personal in my writing for the most part, but these movies have really gotten me to tap into more of that personal side and really looking at why I love movies and why I love horror movies so much. And I've had time to do it, and I've had time to like not want to think about it, but it like these movies are just so delicious.
I always think back to the Wes Craven quote, and I don't remember it completely off the top of my head, but it was something to the effect of like, horror is sort of like an emotional boot camp where it's like it's how we process. Us consuming horror is sort of like how we can process the horrors of reality. And I think it does such a good job, and I think we've seen that this year in particular as being a way of allowing us to feel emotions and also to kind of understand just how fucked up this year has really been. So I think that's I think that's what's really great about horror.
I know.
And I think it's just a really good year for horror. I really do.
It was a really good year for horror. Well, everybody, those are our top 10 movies of 2020. So let us know what your favorite movies of this year were. Yeah. Let us know what you think of our top 10. Let us know what your favorites were. Let us know what really got you on an emotional level. We want to hear it all. So you can send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com. And next Little Cuts episode, we'll be sure to read off some of those messages we get. So please send us an email. And then also tell us on Twitter. I'm at MB McAndrews.
And I'm at Gailey Dreadful.
And of course, you can tag the podcast and make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe.
Thank you to Steve Barnold for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. And thank you everyone for listening. And thank you everyone for all of your support this year. This is our last episode of 2020. And we could not have gotten this far without all of you. It means the absolute world. So
it really does.
Stay safe out there. But most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next year.
Ugh.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children? Won't somebody please think of the children?
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.